Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world, and welcome to this DevOps.com program, brought to you by Techstrong, AWS, and LaunchDarkly. My name is Cody J. Brown, host of Techstrong Learning, and we do have an exciting program for you today. First, I do need to cover just a couple of housekeeping notes. So today's session is being recorded. If you miss any of our discussion, or maybe you'd like to rewatch or share with a friend, the on-demand recording will be made available shortly after we conclude our live session today. If you have any questions, and we really hope that you do, we want you to send those into us using the Q&A tab, which can be found on the right side of your screen. Now, that's also where you're going to find the chat tab, and that's where we want you to get to know your fellow audience members. Maybe just let us know from where you're tuning in. We want you in that chat. And of course, before we close out, we are giving away 4 $25 Amazon gift cards. So be sure to stick around for the duration of today's program. So on to the title of today's program, No Downtime in Production, a DevOps Toolkit for Safer CI/CD. And joining me is Ara Polito, Staff Developer Advocate at Datadog, and Daniel O'Brien, Ecosystem Engineer at LaunchDarkly. Ara and Daniel, thank you both so much for joining me. Daniel, do you want to take the microphone from here?
Sure. Thank you for having us, Cody. As Cody was mentioning, I'm currently an ecosystem engineer with LaunchDarkly. Previous to that, my background is more on an operations focus, and I've been part of operations teams where they've had incidents in production. Now, I work as an ecosystem engineer working with partners such as Datadog to help prevent those kind of incidents from happening. And when they do happen, to help find that information sooner. And I'm joined today by Ara.
Hi, thanks, Dan. So today I'm a staff developer advocate at Datadog. Prior to that, I've been working on most of my career as system engineering, so a lot of Linux experience, and then containers, and finally Kubernetes is my expertise. At Datadog, I continue working with partners, with the community to make our SDK better, to teach also developers how to use Datadog on a daily basis. I'm based out of Malaga in Spain, so hello from Malaga. I see that a lot of people coming from LA, Fort Worth, Houston, London, etc. So welcome all. Thanks for sharing where you're coming from on the chat window, and I'll pass it up to Dan to start the presentation.
Sure. Let's just take a minute to talk about why we're all here. If you've signed up for this webinar, at one point you've probably been part of an incident where production, or you can insert your own production-like instance here, was down. So our goal today is to talk to you about a different approach that can be taken. By combining feature management and observability, you can have a quicker, clearer path to remediation. And anyone can do releases at scale. Deploying on every commit with no testing is going to get you releases at scale. It's not exactly the releases at scale you probably want to be doing. What you want to be doing is safe releases at scale. And for safe releases at scale, you need that combination of feature management and observability. Even with all the test coverage in the world, there's still the times that your code lands and it starts running in production, and then something goes wrong. That's what we're here to talk to you about today, how to both minimize those possibilities and mitigate them as quickly as possible when they do end up occurring. Feature management gives you the runtime control over the application, and observability gives you the insights into the health of that application. So this is useful throughout the whole time the application is running, but today we're going to be taking a bit deeper of a look, and especially risky period of the changes. That's when deployments happen. Now, for many teams, deployments and releases are the same thing. When you deploy the code, it immediately becomes available to all of your customers out in those instances. And it doesn't need to be this way. What we like to think of as a better view of the world is separating deployments from releases. So they're entirely different events. Deployments can generally be happening nonstop throughout the week as your code is complete. An engineer creates a PR, all the checks pass, that code gets merged and deployed out to the environment, but the environment has no running changes to it. You can think of a release as enabling specific functionality for your users. So with Launch Darkly, this is as easy as turning on a feature flag. And there can be scopes to those releases. You could enable it just for some internal users, or you can make it available to all of your users. Now, when you have feature flagging, we want to build on top of that and talk about feature management as the platform itself. And we really think of this as encompassing the whole release process to empower your teams to roll that new functionality out to those desired users. Free your engineers to deliver code at their pace while retaining the full control of when and where those features are turned on for your end users. What makes feature management exciting to me is how it interconnects with all the other tools and platforms that you're using today. For example, LaunchDarkly has integrations with IDEs, so you can get that flag information while you're working on the code itself. We have integrations with observability platforms such as Datadog, and you can also interact with your flags directly in your communication tools such as MS Teams or Slack. It also allows you to build standardized release processes that meet your governance and contractual needs. As I was just talking about with standardized and release processes, I love this quote from Dave and his team at iCIMS, where they worked to realize this new capability. No longer was their engineering team constrained by business because of some of their slower moving enterprise customers. Now their engineering team could move as fast as they wanted to deliver the software. And when to release that software was shifted to the business team to make that call. So it was already out there and running in those environments. Now, let me pass it over to Ara to talk some about observability.
Thanks, Dad. I'm seeing that some people have already some questions on the chat window. I encourage you to move them to Q&A. We will have enough time at the very end, 5 to 10 minutes at the minimum for questions. We are going to answer those live. So feel free to move them to Q&A, continue with the chatter there. So after this, one of the things that Dan was saying was safer releases at scale. And basically what we're trying to achieve is to make sure that if something goes wrong, we reduce the blast radius of things that can go wrong to the rest of our users. So obviously it's not the same thing to have an outage that only affects maybe your internal users. That's something that only affects a region or that it affects all your users. But the question here, when you're doing those releases, when you're trying to make those safe releases, one of the questions that you may have is, what is a safe release? So how can I make the decision that this release was a good one and move forward? And that's where observability comes into place. Your application has to be observable. Basically, it has to produce enough data, and you need to have the right tools to make sense of that data to make those decisions. And some of the questions I put here, some examples of questions that you may have as soon as you make that release. So a very good question is, does this new feature increases the latency of my application? And this is, I put this the first one because, as we all know, with microservices and distributed applications, trying to mimic production environments elsewhere is very, very difficult because obviously the size of the network is different, the size of the hosts are different, the traffic is different, and all of that adds up to all these sort of problems that you may not know that are going to happen. Another classic question, also part of these famous golden signals, this new release of my service is increasing the error rate. So hopefully you are gathering all this data over time, and you know when you have your normal error rate, maybe you're retrying, and that's okay. But you need to know if you're increasing that as part of the new release. So moving away, another question that you're moving away from the technical side of things, it's also important to track business metrics. So maybe you're creating a new feature to expect a return. So a new feature that you hope it drives more sales, or you hope that it drives more clicks into a particular place of your application. So if you're not gathering those business metrics and are not really related to the performance of the application, you're not going to be able to know exactly that, whether you need to go back to your whiteboard and rethink the feature, or if it's okay to move to more and more users. And also related to this is also discoverability. So how do I know that my product team has worked a lot on this new feature, the engineering team has worked a lot on implementing it, and now we push it to production? How do we know whether it's being used or not, and why? So things like having access to real user monitoring is very, very important in order to, again, making those decisions for your strategy. And with all of this is where Datadog tries to help you. So Datadog, the company I work for, is an observability and security platform that basically is going to help companies improve the observability of their infrastructure and applications and their security. So, and how we are going to do that. So some of the things that Datadog has as a platform, first off, and something that we are going to be showing a lot during the demo, is application performance monitoring. And application performance monitoring is, it involves a lot more, but the most basic thing with APM is distributed tracing. So with microservice architectures, a request coming from a user is going to it's going to flow through different services, and you need to know where that request is going and why and for how long in order to make decisions. And one of the concerns of APM from people who are already running applications in production is that it's going to take a lot of effort to instrument the application and start getting enough data. But thankfully, on the past few years, there are a lot of new techniques of auto-instrumentation, and we are going to show some of those on the demo that basically allows you to just add a library and already get a lot of information. It's not going to be exactly the same as if you were instrumented your application manually, but it's going to give you already a lot of good information. Datadog also helps with business metrics. You can send any custom metrics that you want on your application. Also, real user monitoring and synthetics to make sure that you understand how people are using the front end of your application. And finally, I put here, obviously, Datadog is a huge platform. It has more than this, but I selected this for, and I selected logs, because one of the things that it's also important to understand is when you're doing things like feature flagging, progressive delivery, canary deployments, etc., if you find an error in production that you didn't catch on any other of the stages where that feature went through, it's maybe because it's only reproducible or is easily reproducible in production. So you want to continue debugging in production. So having good logs coming in production that you can use while you're investigating the issue. And again, thanks to feature flagging, you can control that. As you debug, users are actually not seeing that error, and that's the magic of it. But it's great that you're able to continue reviewing those logs and debugging in production. And this is what Stephen was telling here on this quote from the London Stock Exchange, is that they were able to get insights and massive number of data points of their application that is going to improve their development cycle. So all of this, basically, the goal is to improve the development cycle, improve the engineering lives, and making sure that everything is a lot easier and better for everyone. Back to you, Dan.
Sure. So to summarize the themes we've been talking about here, visibility and control are very important to your teams to have both of those during the runtime of the application. And when we think about progressively releasing a feature, we go through a set of stages. The feature is released behind a feature flag, may have made available to your internal users first in that real production environment. Then the data is collected during this time, and we make sure everything is looking okay in a Datadog. If it's not, then you can iterate and go back through this continual cycle where you test and deploy it. So as code is tested and confidence is built, we gradually turn the user on for our end users. We gradually turn the features on for our end users, continuing to test and validate along the way, finally releasing to 100% of users, whatever that is. Certain features may only be available to a set of users forever, or you may make it available to all users. Then throughout this process, if an error occurs, we can instantly roll that feature back just by turning off a feature flag. Let's take a look at some of the current integrations we have between LaunchDarkly and Datadog. This first integration we're taking a look at, to me, is kind of the bread and butter or the default integration that if you're a LaunchDarkly customer and a Datadog customer, right after this webinar, you should go and set it up. This allows you to receive feature flag changes in Datadog. So you can then surface when, for instance, a feature flag was turned on or when it was turned off in your Datadog dashboard. The next one we'll take a look at is our dashboard widget. This is actually surfacing control of the feature flags in Datadog itself. So not only that, you can actually filter it down because your dashboard may be tied to specific services or a specific view of your overall feature. You can use filters such as tags on your feature flags to only get a list of those feature flags that are applicable for that dashboard. Then you can control the feature flag right from Datadog itself. This final integration we're talking about is what we call flag triggers. This is when you can have an alert set up in Datadog, and when that alert fires, you can actually take an action in LaunchDarkly. For instance, you could either turn a feature off or you could turn a feature flag on. Where we see a lot of interest in this kind of feature is, if your team has some technical debt that you're aware of, you know what it is, and you know there's an alert associated with it, you can set that up that you can turn that functionality off when it alerts, and then someone can go back in and actually remediate that issue. And finally, we'll end with this quote from Tide, who's a joint customer of Datadog and LaunchDarkly's. I feel like this summarizes what we've been talking about this entire time between speed and reliability. It allows them to move faster and safer. That's really what we would like people to take away from this webinar, that you can do both of those together using LaunchDarkly and Datadog. And now we'll take a jump into the demo.
Cool. Let's start with the fun part. So this is going to be a live demo. So I hope that demo gods are with us today, but anything can go wrong. Hopefully not. So let me share my screen. And this is what we are going to see here. So obviously, we need an application. We need an application running in production. This application here is running in Kubernetes, although the way you deploy the application is irrelevant. It could be serverless, it could be VM, it could be really anything. On this particular case, it's running on Kubernetes. So this is an e-commerce application, a little bit bare-bone, but functional nevertheless. This is basically a Rails application, a monolithic Rails application, but it has two microservices. So the first microservice is this part here, that it's basically a discount microservice written in Python that serves discounts. So every time you refresh the page, you're going to get a different discount. So it's going to get a request into that service to get a discount. And it also, this part here, that it's a microservice that serves advertising. And obviously this ad here is not very ready for a big event, but it's going to help us understanding what we are doing here. So basically, using color coding, what we are going to do is that to distinguish when we are running a version or the other, you're going to get this blue ad when it's version 1. And if you refresh the page, you will get a different ad, but always blue and always 1 point something. This is version 1. So this is the application that we are going to be using. And this application here is already instrumented for distributed tracing and APM. And one of the things that I want to make clear, And this app, this is actually open source, so you can have a look if you want. So you will see that there is no specific manual instrumentation. Everything is auto-instrumented. So everything that you're going to be seeing here, you get more or less out of the box if you use one of the instrumentation libraries that we use here. So what do you get with distributed tracing and APM? So every time that a request is made to an application, all these traces are being generated and shown here. And this is basically the live what's happening. So you can see that it's flowing. And that's because we also created some fake traffic that always makes requests to the page. So things are more dynamic. And you can see all the requests that we are getting into the page. If we click on one of these traces, and this is basically what you get. This is what we call a trace in distributed tracing, and it basically represents all the latency that is happening from the user making a request until they get a response, and how it flows that request through all the different services. So you can see that it starts obviously on the index page on a Rails application, but if we scroll here, you can see that it's calling the discount URL for the Python microservice. You can see it has Flask application, and also getting the ads. And then the rest of the time is mostly spent on rendering. That way, one of the great things about distributed tracing and APM, and that's why the P on APM is performance, is that you're able to understand where that latency is coming from. So if you see that the user is getting a latency of 4 seconds from beginning to end, you're able to pinpoint the places where you need to put effort if you want to make it faster. Cool. So we are getting all these requests in. Not only we get individual those requests in, but also Datadog is able to use that information to create architecture diagrams of your application. So instead of having, I know when an application starts having too many microservices that talk to each other, your architecture team usually spends a lot of time just updating those diagrams to make sure that new developers understand what things are talking to what things. That becomes updated very, very soon. So thanks to distributed tracing and APM, you're able to have live this type of information already that gets updated. If we create a new microservice and we start deploying that microservice and start getting requests, this is going to be updated automatically. And you can see that, for example, here, the front-end service, you can see the number of requests that it's getting per second, the latency, etc., the errors. You can see that it's talking to ads, the service called ads, that is getting ads from Postgres, and it's also talking to discounts, and you can see everything flowing. So you can see exactly how the application is behaving. Same thing, if you're getting errors, you're going to know through these traces, if you realize that users are getting errors, where that error is happening. And you can also correlate it with the potential logs that you may have. So everything on the same place, you're able to know exactly your requests from beginning to end, if any errors are happening. And if any errors are happening, you can also discover the logs that are related to that particular request. Let's, as we said, we are going to play a lot with the ads microservice. This is the one that we are going to do a lot of changes to. So this is an out-of-the-box dashboard that Datadog has that I think it's super important. Like every service that you have instrumented in Datadog, either through manual or auto-instrumentation, is going to have one of these pages. And you're going to see the errors that it's having, if any SLOs are being matched or not, requests versus errors, latency, etc., etc. So let's start with fun parts. So let's imagine that our product team has decided that this ad service needs a new engine, It needs to have more functionality. It needs to produce different ads as well. So the engineering team went and created that new application, coded for a while, created a new image of the application, and now it's time to deploy that application. And we are going to do that. And remember what Dan was saying. Releases is not the same as deployment. Here, what we are going to do is just do the deployment. And the way we are going to do that is basically creating the new deployment of our application. So if we check our pods here, this is started yet 5 seconds ago. So this is version 2 of our service. If we go back to our page and refresh, though, we are still going to get the old version. So the ad's still blue. It still says 1 point something. Dan, why is that happening?
Sure. That's happening because the engineering team wrapped this new functionality in a feature flag. So it made the deployment a non-event. It went out there, everything looks the same. And now if we take a look at the Launch Darkly dashboard, we can see this is our production environment, and we have a list of feature flags. As I was mentioning, we are working on a new ad engine. So we have a feature flag actually called Enable New Ad Engine. You can see with our feature flags also, we have not only the name, but it gives you some additional metadata so you can know what that feature flag is for. In this case, the feature flag is off, so you can see that it's currently serving the false value. Now, let's go ahead and just turn that feature flag on for all of our users and see what happens. And if we toggle that switch there, and then in this case, we're in our production environment, so you can't just turn it on. You actually have to request an approval. Because this is a demo, we'll allow ourselves to self-approve it. But normally in production, you could have it as a peer review, similar to like a GitHub pull request review, where someone goes through and makes sure that that change is okay. And not only that, we have integrations with external approvals, such as ServiceNow. So now, once we go ahead and get this applied, we can see that that feature flag has now been updated to be on. And if we take a look at the application, you can see here that as soon as we start reloading it, we have that new version. So we're now serving version 2 of the ad engine here.
Cool. It was great to see that we were able to quickly enable that feature without having to match it with a deployment. The deployment was already done. We just released that new feature. Okay, so now we've made a release. And one of the things that obviously we want to know is if this release is better or not. If we see here, now we are able to see in Datadog that we have 2 deployments of our application. And you can compare them. So 1.0 is the first one that we created, and 2.0 is here. And we can see that something seems to be okay, like we're getting the functionality, but we're seeing some weird stuff. So at the beginning, the latency of this new version was okay, but then suddenly it spiked here. And obviously something that we want to check what's going on. And because we're using feature flagging and because we're using Launch Darkly, so one of the things that we can do is to create our own dashboards and create the ability of matching something that is happening on Launch Darkly with any other metric that we may have. So in this case, for example, we can see that we had an event here that enabled this new ad engine, and suddenly our maximum latency, but also our P75 latency went suddenly up. So it's clear that although the feature is doing it's correctly, it's showing the new ads, we need to make sure that we don't show this new latency. We need to investigate what's going on. And the fastest way to do that is then?
let's just turn a feature flag off. And then within 200 milliseconds, that update, when it occurs, will be pushed out to all those running instances. So they all get that same view of the world within less than a second.
Okay, let's do that. We've turned that off. And so if we refresh now, we are getting back the new version, the old version.
And now we can take a look and let's see what happened with that latency.
Sounds good. So we just turn it off. So hopefully if we refresh, this is the same version. At some point, we should get, again, that drop. So let's refresh a couple of seconds. And hopefully we will see that this doesn't come back up. Good. So let's do the next thing. So obviously the team went back to fix the issue. So there was a lot of excitement with the new engine. It didn't work out as well as we intended. So the team went back to fix the issue. They did fix the issue, and they created a new version of the same engine. They call it this one version 2.1 because basically it's the same functionality. They're just hoping to fix the latency issues. So let's have a look. That one is running. Okay, so this is hopefully the new version. But what the team did was to put it on the same, because we were still not sure about this. So they put it on the same feature flag. So what do we need to do to see that?
And yeah, so as Ara was mentioning, so now that we're ready, let's go ahead and turn that flag back on in production.
Okay, let's do that. I'm going to self-approve for now for demo purposes. And again, this is exactly the same feature flag that we were using before. It's just a new version with the fix. So hopefully if we refresh this now, we are getting now, again, the new ad. And this is what, one of the things that we said is that this is version 2.1 of our application that has the second engine, but hopefully the bug is fixed. So the next thing that we need to do is going back to Datadog and see if that's the case. So if we now see here the deployments that we're having, we see that we've been, on the past hour, we've seen 1.0, 2.0, and 2.1. And we can compare 2.1 to 2.0. And you can see that it's already looking a lot better. So the latency of 2.1, even though we're seeing the new engine, and therefore on the previous version, we were seeing that increase of latency, in this particular case, we are not. You can see that this is flat. We're good. We can relax and continue doing more work, because this is what we do as developers. We move on to the next feature. And we can see here all the events that are happening in Launch Darkly. So you can see all the events that are happening. So in any case, if you need to audit something that happened in production, you can do that. Cool. So what's our next feature then?
Sure. So after that successful ad engine launch, there's now a new promotion that the product team wants to do, and they want to enable discounts, but just for specific users. So it's not like they want to give everyone a discount on this new launch. And what we can do is our engineering team can work on that feature, and let's validate it internally first. We don't want all of the end users, even that subset that should be targeted, to see this. So we'll have it using LaunchDark, the rule targeting. So here you can see that the feature flag is still off. And as R is scrolling down just a little bit, we have this first rule that's saying if someone's an internal user, then we want the true variation to serve to them. So that will only enable it for just them, and everyone else receives that false variation. So let's go ahead and enable this in production.
Let's do that. So same thing, enable discounts for internal users. And I'm going to self-approve this one. And I need to write that I am in production. It's great to see that you need to type production when you're making changes in production. It's a great user experience to make sure that you don't make mistakes. So it's a good one.
Absolutely. We love teams that have safety there, but we understand in your development environments, you may want to move a little bit faster for it. So it's actually entirely configurable that you can just toggle a flag in your lower environments, but still have all those safety checks when you're dealing with the production environment itself.
Okay, cool. So we're turned that on, but we are not getting any discounts yet.
Okay, let's create an internal user for ourselves, and let's take a look at that.
I think I already have one, so that should be faster.
And there we go. So now, because R is an internal user on an engineering team, we were able to target her with that feature flag only. Now, let's see what happens if we go ahead and remove that rule.
Okay, let's go back here and just remove delete rule. And then I have to review requests again, isn't it?
Exactly. Okay, so now that rule is updated, the feature is serving false to everyone. Even though you can see it's turned on, we actually have that default rule down bottom as false. So that means no one has access to it.
Okay, let's refresh and see what happens.
And now you see we're back to this. So this is how you can enable those progressive rollouts. It doesn't have to be internal users that you're testing. You may have early access groups of users or certain segments of users. Really, any metadata that your application knows about, you can then use in feature flag targeting to determine which variation you should serve to those users.
Cool. This is very cool. And one of the things that that for this type of feature where let's maybe turn this on again. Well, it doesn't matter. So let's make sure that this is true for everyone. Let's try that.
And you just have to delete that rule right there.
Yes.
Exactly.
And there is a typo, but I'm not going to fix it. And I'm still in production. So hopefully that's defaults to true, and it's still on. So now every user it's going to get discounts. So this works. One of the things that when we were talking about as well, things like real user monitoring, basically this is where this type of feature comes in very handy. So you want to check the performance of your front end as well, but you also want to check whether people, for example, are clicking on that discount. You can create actions. You can see what pages people are navigating to it. If that discount goes to a special page, whether that people, how much time people spend on that page, everything from Datadog. One of the things that also is very, very useful in Launch Darkly for this type of feature are experiments. Dan, do you want to talk a little bit about experimentation?
Sure. As part of that progressive rollout, you could actually run experiments on it based on the metrics and KPIs that your team cares about, or you can check things even like cart size if you want to make sure that that was not an affected metric. So all this is possible because we know which variations are being served to users. So you can actually then do further experimentation on that.
Cool. This was very, very good. So everything worked. nice demo. I'm going to stop sharing now. And I think we have enough time for Q&A.
Okay, great. Let's take a look at the questions. It looks like we have a first question here of flag triggers allow you to turn a flag off, but what types of Datadog monitors can you use for that?
That's a very quick question. So one of the things is that in Datadog, you can create monitors, basically alerts on almost any data that you have in Datadog. So obviously metrics, that's a classic one, but you can also do on events. You can also do on SLOs. And this one is pretty good, because if you have an SLO for a particular service, if suddenly your errors are going up, for example, you can use that monitor to switch a feature flag. So any monitor that you have in Datadog, and you can have monitors based on almost anything that you have in Datadog, can be used to turn on or turn off feature flags.
That's a great one on the SLOs. I didn't think about that one. Okay. It looks like we have another one for the best way to get rid of flags from your code base after a full rollout. So I can take that one for a moment. With Launch Darkly, we have a concept of what we call code references. So we can actually find your feature flags used throughout the code base. And the minimum we would need to receive is just a file name and a line number. But we can tell you everywhere that flag is used throughout your code base. So what we have some customers do is when they're ready, they'll actually set a ticket to reference the code references page itself to know where to clean up.
That's great customer service. Another question that we see here, and something that I think for people doing rolling updates and people doing things like canary deployments, etc., they say, well, feature flags is good, but why can't I just do a rollback if something goes wrong?
Great question. And it's one we often hear. The way we kind of view it is complementary. You definitely want to have your rollback process set so you can do an immediate rollback. But many times there's changes that you can't just roll back from, that your only option would be to roll forward, or you have a group of changes all bundled together into a release. Even 3 or 4 changes, you don't always want to roll back. So with feature flagging, you can actually isolate it by the feature level and just disable that feature while still releasing everything else that was in that deployment. You can still have all of those feature flags turned on there.
That's a very, very good one. So please keep sending the questions. We can continue talking to each other while people get the questions in. Do you see any other question, Dan, that you want to?
Yeah, I see. Looks like there's 2 other ones here. One was how to deal with database schema changes. And for that one, I wish I had a one-size-fits-all answer, but we really don't. It comes down to the implementation details of how you're doing it. We do have customers that work with database schema changes. Launch Darkly itself works at the application layer. So you can actually wrap your application logic in the feature flags to determine for that schema migration. But what that looks like individually really depends on the setup. And we would be happy to talk to you after this if you want to continue this conversation. And then it looks like there's one more for what strategies have people used to identify internal users for testing, create known test accounts in production? Yes, that is one definite option we've seen customers use. Known test accounts. We also have some that if it's applications that are tied into something like Active Directory or something else, as long as the application itself can get access to that metadata, you can pass it in as attributes to Launch Darkly and then do targeting based on that. Some customers do it based on email address. So the end of the email address means it's like if it was at launchdarkly.com, it would be a Launch Darkly internal employee testing. So you could do it that way. Really, as long as your application knows they're an internal user, you can get that logic into Launch Darkly to enable it.
And also as long as you do email check-in after after signing up to your service.
Yes.
We have another question. Does this track, I guess, APM over multiple applications, both monolith services, microservices, DB, and hardware? The answer is yes. So basically, you've seen already some of it. So you've seen on that trace, on the application level trace, you've seen the monolith, which was Ruby on Rails, and you can actually instrument. So in the case that we shown, it was auto instrumentation, thanks to that it's a Rails application. So if you have a Rails application, for example, it will auto instrument certain parts of the framework. But as part of your manual instrumentation, you can do spans and new metadata wherever you want. So you can split that the ways you want. We've seen microservices because we've seen the Python, a couple of Python. And I didn't scroll into it, but you are able to see that one of the spans was generated by the Postgres database. And actually, this is also connected to our database monitoring. So you can actually see the SQL sentence that was getting the database. So you can actually see what SQL sentence was that span. And if you see that span growing, you can actually go to database monitoring and see what are the most lasting SQL sentences that your database is getting. In terms of between hardware, APM is up on the application level, but we have also infrastructure monitoring and network monitoring. So you can also check is some of the latency is coming from a hardware point of view.
That SQL, being able to track that sounds really powerful. I've had to trace down slow queries at times, and it's never fun. So having that at your fingertips, I can't imagine how much easier it makes it.
It does. It does.
I'm taking a look. I don't see any other questions from the audience.
So I saw a question, follow-up question that said thick clients rather than just browser-based. Yes, any application we have. One of the biggest profiling, we also have not only APM, but also profiling. It's, for example, for the JVM and Java. So if you have a big Java application, that's also good. And if you're using things like Rust or Go for things that, or C, that things that need to be more lightweight, we also have that.
That's great. I think that's all we had for the folks today. Give us just one moment, and Cody will join us again. And there he is.
Hi, guys. I just want to give the audience a moment to send in any last-second questions that they may come up with. So while we do that, I'm going to go ahead and give away a couple of gift cards and then do a little bit of housekeeping, and then we'll check those Q&As one more time. So these are for 4 $25 Amazon gift cards. Our first winner is Shailendra B. Our second winner is Derek S. Our third winner is Sandeep S. And our fourth and final winner is Dan R. So to our 4 winners, congratulations. Please keep an eye on your inbox to claim that gift card. But if you do not happen to see that email, just check your spam folder. And just as another reminder, this session was recorded. So following this program, you should receive an email with a link to access the recording on demand, or you can find it living on the DevOps website at devops.com/webinars, and just be sure to look in the on-demand section. So
Good.
Daniel, did we receive any more questions in that short window?
Yes, we have one. Is that a cost-effective for an AWS environment? The answer is yes. To put an example, not only cost-effective, but a lot of our customers are on AWS. Datadog is running Datadog itself on several environments, also on AWS. and we use Datadog for monitoring. So the answer is yes. We not only can do things like APM and things profiling application level, but we will also track your AWS infrastructure. So you will be able to see your EC2 instances, your Lambdas, anything that you can imagine that you have on AWS is going to be tracked through a fantastic integration that we have with all AWS cloud.
All right. So since I've already handled the first half of my housekeeping, I just wanted to ask if you guys have any parting words before we close out.
Just wanted to take a moment to thank everyone for spending the morning, afternoon, or night with us. And if you have any additional questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. Happy to chat on Twitter or send me an email.
Yes, same thing. Thanks everyone for attending. Thanks for the questions. Those were great. It's always great to see those coming. And thanks, Cody, for organizing this.
Of course. Well, thank you, Ara, and thank you, Daniel, both for joining me today. I would also like to thank AWS and LaunchDarkly for sponsoring today's program. And to our audience, thank you so much for joining us for the duration of today's program. We do ask for just one extra moment of your time for a brief survey that will pop up on your screen as soon as we close out. But otherwise, we do hope to see everyone at an upcoming Techstrong Learning program. Everyone, have a great rest of your day.
Bye-bye.
Bye.